All right, for more on the big speech tonight from President Trump, we have Kevin Hassett, National Economic Council Director and very dear friend. Kevin, welcome back on set. So you're working, this is important folks to know, you and Scott Bessent are working with the people in the Senate and the House, right, to produce a policy. But you're going to produce, these are Trump policies. Right. These are Trump tax cuts. These are Trump budget cuts. They're going to have Trump's imprimatur on them. We'll probably hear about it tonight.
Yeah, you're definitely going to hear about it tonight, and it's something we talked about with the president in the Oval yesterday. And the bottom line is that when history writes the record of this amazing year, then one of the things they're going to say is that we passed the Trump tax cuts, and the Trump tax cuts were the biggest tax cuts in history by a lot. And those giant tax cuts are going to create an enormous amount of economic growth, and they're going to be paid for. They're going to be paid for by ending all this wasteful government spending. And we're doing it with Congress, and we're doing it with DOGE. That we met in the Roosevelt Room with the Speaker, the Majority Leader, and other members of Congress, and everybody 100% is behind the idea that President Trump has a vision of a golden age in America. But the point is, right now, until Congress acts, we're in an economy that is being governed by Joe Biden's policies. And we got to get these tax cuts passed as soon as possible so that the golden age can begin.
You know, I mentioned this last night and the night before. These numbers coming in, these are Biden economic numbers, for heaven's sakes. Trump's policies have not been implemented yet. You can't pin anything on him until he gets his package through, which is going to be, whatever, several months away. This is Biden's legacy, and it's a recession or a near recession.
Right. Joe Biden gave us stagflation. He gave us the Green New Deal. He wasted so much money. And Congress hasn't rolled that back yet. Elon is doing his work. But until Congress passes the law that changes the budgetary authorities, then the money that Elon is finding that we shouldn't be spending is just sitting in the bank account for some cabinet agency. And President Trump knows that the way to stop inflation is to stop wasteful government spending and to have supply-side tax cuts. And that's what we're doing.
I mean, Kevin, this is so important. These are the Trump policies. He was elected president. With all due respect to the Republican senators and the Republican House members, these are administration policies, which you are now carrying out in these meetings. And I guess I need to ask, how's it going?
It's going great. It's absolutely going great. And again, think about it. The way we say that it's the biggest tax cut in history is that we're going to extend all those things that gave us 3% growth. And then we're going to have no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, all the other things that the president is advocating that create supply side things. So if you don't have a tax on tips, if you don't have a tax on overtime, what do people do? They work harder. They work harder. They increase supply. That puts downward pressure on prices and upward pressure on prosperity.
And at the same time, so you've got budget reviews going on. You've got Elon's DOGE review going on. You've got OMB's reviews going on. So there should be. I mean, the public wants to see less government spending. And I think the public wants to see a disempowering of this overbearing regulatory bureaucracy.
Right, they do. And what the public also wants to see is the end of all the corruption that we're seeing. You see how much money from USAID is going through to Democrats and Democratic causes, that we're going to stop that and stop wasting people's money on politics and start making government do what people want, to defend the country, to keep the air clean, things like that, but not to send money to USAID to do all the crazy things that are basically funding Democratic campaign ideas.
Can we get, if you get the whole package, you get Trump's whole package, okay, tax cuts, spending cuts, deregulation, energy, et cetera, unfair trading practices, can we get back to 3% plus economic growth?
We absolutely will. And not only that, but I think we can easily get to 4. Ooh. And the reason is that we've got everything in train that we did before, where we got 3% growth. And now we've got this other thing, which is the AI revolution, which is making productivity go up at about twice the rate as it did before. And so if we get 3%, I'll actually be pretty disappointed. I think that we should shoot for 4. And I think that's going to be kind of the message that you're going to see for the president tonight. He probably won't say the number, but he understands that this is a time for a golden age. This is a time for aspiration. But we got to get Joe Biden's policies out of there as fast as possible, because that's where the golden age begins.
Well, that's a really important point. I love it, Sully. These liberals, are trying to pin, yesterday's number or last week's number on Trump. It has nothing to do with Trump because policy is not in place yet. Now, if you get better growth, I mean, it's not just a theoretical thing. If you get better growth, doesn't that lower the deficit? If you get better growth, doesn't that lower the debt burden?
Yeah, it sure does. But we also are going to lower it by not having the wasteful spending. But think about it this way. Think about all the things that President Trump is going to describe tonight in the speech. And then think about what the world looks like 2 years from now if those things happen. So we've got a peaceful world. We've got a prosperous world. We've got wage growth that's going to be $4,000 or $5,000 a family again. We got all that going on. And so how optimistic should you be about the country? Everybody's talking about the anxiety of the changes that we're making. But the changes are necessary because we're ending the stagflationary spiral that Joe Biden created with really smart policies. But we're making the changes right now.
I remember years ago talking about lowering the corporate tax. And by the way, made in America, the corporate tax could come down to 15%.
That's what the president
There was this
wants.
guy from a think tank in Washington named Kevin Hassett who was always writing that if you cut the corporate tax and you cut business taxes, the biggest beneficiaries would be the blue-collar workforce.
Right.
That was you. You were right. You'll be right again if he cuts the taxes all over again.
Right. And here's a headline.
Blue-collar workforce.
Here's a headline for people right now that President Trump and I talked in the Oval a long time ago for the previous tax cuts about what would happen to wages. And we said it'll go up between $4,000 and $8,000. And in fact, they went up $6,000. Right? It went up right between the range. But he always promised $4,000 because that's what he wants to do. He wants to underpromise and overdeliver. He hasn't asked us for what the number is yet, but I can tell you right now that it's going to be closer to $8,000
Wow.
if we pass these
Wow,
tax cuts.
$8,000 for a typical
Correct.
working family.
That's what it's
the
gonna be.
coalition.
And,
Kevin.
and the point is we said it before, and then it happened.
It did happen.
And so people need to believe it. It's in the data.
All right. Facts. The facts matter. Kevin Hassett,
Thanks,
Director of the National Economic Council. Thank you very much for coming.